Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity of meeting at this time. We pray for your Holy Spirit's continued guidance as we look at this important topic on dress reform is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, so dress reform or dress and health, and why is it important for us to look at the aspect of how we dress and what we wear as it relates to our health, both physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and otherwise. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so those are just some of the areas we're looking at. And finally, at the end, looking at where we are going to spend eternity and what we will be wearing there. Okay, so we take you back. Dress reform, what shall we wear? Now, the whole aspect of dress is actually one of the laws of life, one of the laws of health. Let's have a look from the book Christian Temperance and Bible Hygiene, page 12. It tells us knowledge must be gained in regard to how we eat and drink and dress so as to preserve health. Sickness is the result of violating nature's law. So it is a law of health, because just like the other laws that if violated, we've covered pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness, rest, we've covered them. But dress is also one that is intended to preserve health, and if we violate it, we can become sick. And there's another statement, Councils on Diets and Foods, page 157. Temperance in eating, drinking, sleeping, and dressing is one of the grand principles of religious life. Another statement, it is true sanctification, and we know, one, you accept the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior, you're justified, but sanctification is a work of a lifetime. Well, how are we, what practices and habits do we have in this sanctified life? So it's speaking to us now in this time of our life, having as Christians and accepting Christ. This is true sanctification. It requires that our habits of eating, drinking, and dressing be such as to secure the preservation of physical, mental, and moral health, that we may present to the Lord our bodies, not an offering corrupted by wrong habits, but a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God. So God created all things, and He created our world, prepared it in a form that would make it livable for human beings. Then He created man, Adam, Eve, and He said, this is your world, this is your life. And He had a special covering over them. And their garment was one of light that covered, kept them, in good shape, good temperature, and they were quite happy moving around with their covering. And what happened is that sin stepped in. When sin stepped in, when Adam and Eve sinned, the sinless pair discovered something about themselves. They discovered that they wore no clothing. The sinless pair wore no artificial garments. They were clothed with a covering of light and glory such as the angels wear. This is before sin. But afterward, the eyes of them were both open, and they knew that they were naked. After sin, their eyes were open. They knew that they were naked. Not that they were naked before. They were not naked before. They had a covering of light. But that went away from them when sin came about. And as they looked at themselves, at each other, they were for the first time aware that they had no covering. The light, the precious light was gone. And that is what sin does to the human body. It strips you of everything. It strips you of your clothing. It strips you of your dignity, your self-respect, your respect for God, your connection. It's broken. Sin just separates. It separates even the clothing from the body. And that is what sin would do, take away the clothing. However, in their recognition that they were naked, these people were from a sinless world and a sinless life. So they knew that they needed covering. So in their little human, now sin-deprived form and being, they tried to cover themselves, and they did the best they could. I mean, there was no fabric going around that they could pick up. They just picked some leaves that seemed pretty big, or that would have clusters. And so when the eyes of them were both open and they knew that they were naked, they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves apron. And one person have said, that the fig leaf even had like a glow about it. So they tried to mimic what God had, a covering of light. But the fig leaves, as they sewed it together, they made themselves a covering. It was nothing compared to what God had. They did the best they could. They covered what they thought to be the essentials. They covered themselves with like an apron. So they made an apron. Now, here you have a little picture. When I look at an apron, it's very scanty. And this is one form of an apron. There are many other shapes of apron, but basically, when you see an apron, you can recognize that it is an apron, no matter how it's shaped. It sort of looks a bit rectangular here. It could be oval in shape. You see one, you would know that's an apron. So, it was something scanty, and that would just cover the essential parts. And that's what they sought to cover themselves with. But God came by looking for them, and he must have shaken his head and say, oh, look at you, pretty little ones. And pitiful looking in your little apron, please. Let's do something better than that. And God, this is what he did. Unto Adam also and to Eve, his wife, did the Lord make coats of skins and clothed them. After they had a sacrifice for their sin, that skin that was taken there from the lamb, it was made into a coat for them to clothe them and cover. God knew that they needed more than this apron. They needed to cover more of their body. He made coats for them. You remember the garment that they had was, full body that covered everywhere. And so he came back again and he gave them coats to cover themselves. And if you look at a coat, if you see a coat, that's a coat, because a coat it's so full of cover. And so this is one example of what a coat looks like, and it's nowhere near an apron. It covers much of the body. And God said, you need a coat, you need to cover much of your body. Now, question today, are you wearing fig leaves? The garment that you have, that you would wear, is it very much skimpy like that of an apron or the fig leaves? Or is it, covering much of the body like that of a coat? Now, does it matter how we dress to God? In the Garden of Eden, it did. He knew Adam and Eve's sin. There was great work to do in restoring them back to their Edenic home. But what was urgent, what was important, is that these human beings needed to be covered. because if they were not covered, they are so frail they could even die. So he took care of that emergent need, and so he covered them. So it does matter to God how Adam and Eve dressed. It mattered then, and it does matter to us now that God is still interested in how we dress. And when he looks at us, does he think, oh, my little child's hair needs to be covered? Are you covered already? He wants to cover us by the blood of the Lamb. He wants to cover us by his robe of righteousness. But at the same time, he wants to make sure we have some artificial clothing to cover ourselves. And he is very disappointed if we don't. And we'll get more into this. So, in Numbers 15, verse 38, on the way to 41, here you had the children of Israel. They were in the wilderness going through, and God told them, here are some instructions that what you need to do for your garment. You had a peculiar people in the children of Israel. He called them aside so that they'd set up their nations, and there were multitudes of them. And he gave them instructions about what to wear. It was so important to him. He gave them the 10 Commandments instructions, moral laws, civil laws and so forth, but he also gave them instructions about what to wear. And so he said to them, you are to wear and this is taken from a book, Reviewing Herod, and the reference is given here. But in reference, if you were to read Numbers 15:38 to 41, you would see the biblical record there. Now, he instructed about a blue border that should be at the hem of their garment. So a blue border on the garment with words of the law embroidered into it. And so it said the first reason was that it would distinguish them from the nations around them. It would distinguish them from the nations around. A second reason is to signify that they were God's peculiar people. They were God's peculiar people. And thirdly, to help them to remember to be obedient and not to go after the world. And these were the reasons why he specified how they were what they were to wear. You're different. You're peculiar people. You need to be looking different. And so, Christian woman, Christian man, we need to be looking different, not as a laughing stock, but distinguished. You are to be looking, as a distinguished person. And so we are also God's peculiar people. We're different. And we are it's also, the dress reform is meant to help us to remember to be obedient and not to go after the world. Now, the whole aspect about dress reform, the subject matter, is not only for women, but it's for our men too. So men, you need to understand what we're sharing here. Now, women, there's a whole lot of guidance for our women, because our woman would be the one who would go off into the different fashions and so forth. A woman could change up so easily, where a man is either a shirt, a pants, socks, shoes, full stop, thereabout. And then you can get to make it look varied by the colors and a little cuts here and there. But for a woman, because she is so unique and special, her options are huge and wide, but let it not be after the world, but after Christ. So dress reform is also for both male and female. Now, is God still interested in what we wear? The people of God are not now required to have a special mark upon garments, but in the New Testament, we are often referred to as ancient Israel, as examples. And if God gave such definite directions to his ancient people in regard to their dress, will not the dress of his people in this age come under his notice? Should there not be in their dress a distinction from that of the world? Should not the people of God, who are his peculiar treasure, seek even in their dress to glorify God? And should they not be examples in point of dress, and by their simple style rebuke the pride, vanity, and extravagance of worldly pleasure-loving professors? God requires this of his people. Pride is rebuked in his word. Second Selected Messages, page 473. So even now, we are a peculiar treasure. We are even in our dress to glorify God. And what is it what I'm wearing glorifying God? Or is it making God so ashamed that he doesn't even want to look upon us? Now, let me give you a little background history. Back in the 19th century, where, the whole message about dress reform was given to God's people back then, the church members. And so you have Sister White, the messages were given to her, and she wrote extensively about dress. Now, the fashion at the time, in Ellen White's time, you had hoops, corsets, long skirts trailing in the dirt. So it would be so long that it would be dragging on the floor. And when you're reading through, the writings and so forth, the different books on dress reform, you would see these terms, hoops. What are hoops? This is what it looks like. It was a structure that was, attached to some clothing on the body, and it would be hung away from the body all the way down low near to the floor. And so once you have had this metal or wire structure, you would put on fabric. So you put fabric on, covering this in some fashionable form, and then the woman would move around with this thing. So it was pretty much like a costume, and it caused a lot of sickness and disease from this because of the weight bearing upon the body and the waist area and so forth, just weighing down the body. And it was quite difficult for women to move around quickly wearing this kind of garment. So you would see pictures like this or in some old movie or so, and that's how the dress would be spanned out. And see, it's very much decorated. And so that was part of the background of what existed back in Ellen White's time. Another aspect of the dress were, what you have here, the corsets. Corsets that would be fitted to the body, and it's not just the fabric shape in this shape, but it would be constructed with wire again, and then you would have some of them that are laced, and you would pull this lace in tightly so that the body would have to take the shape. And so lots of women who were pretty full-figured body would force into something kind of small like this and pull the lace in tight, just to look, like a Coca-Cola bottle shape. But these things promoted disease, and you're actually changing up the form of the body and even the internal structures of the body, internal organs when you're doing this to the body. And then you have bare shoulders, so the corsets, you have the hoops, and then the shoulders would be bare, exposing much of the neck and the back and the chest area. It was awkward, extravagant, and unhealthful. Look, as it trails into the dirt, you're actually taking that dirt into your home, into your bed chamber, and so you're carrying all the filth from the streets. And those things we were warned that they do not constitute health, and they should not have been part of the church body of the people, of the Christians, should not have been part of their clothing and what they wore. So in a frame such as that, God actually gave instructions as to how this dress could be different. How can we reform it so that it would give health to the body rather than break it down? And so on June 6, 1863, Sister White was given a message on dress reform for our people. And she was given a couple of visions around that time too. Now, the reformed dress of the 1860s consisted of a dress with a full skirt attached to a blouse, and over this a sack or a jacket was worn. Beneath was a pair of pants cut full and gathered onto it a band about the ankles. So this is the reformed dress, and she was given in vision an idea, a visual of what the reformed dress would look like. So it was a full skirt attached to the blouse, and you had like a jacket, and underneath there was a pair of pants. It was pretty full, but it gathered down to the ankles. So imagine what that looked like. And the waist was attached by buttons to a top, a blouse top, attached with buttons, and allowed the shoulders to carry the weight of the pants that was underneath. So it wasn't really dependent upon the waist to carry the weight of this pants, but the shoulders bore the weight. And then the skirt, the pants, and the sack were to be of the same colors, everything matching uniformly, and with the skirt length about 9 inches from the floor. And the main reason for the pants was this: there is not one woman in 1,000 who clothes her limbs as she should. Whatever may be the length of the dress, their limbs should be covered as thoroughly as are the men's. This may be done by wearing lined pants, gathered into a band and fastened about the ankle, or made full and tapering at the bottom, and these should come down long enough to meet the shoe, the limbs, and ankles. Thus, clothes are protected against the current of air. And if the feet and limbs are kept comfortable with warm clothing, the circulation will be equalized, and the blood will remain pure and healthy because it is not clothed or hindered in its natural passage through the system. Sorry, it is not the blood will remain pure and healthy because it is not chilled or hindered in its natural passage through the system. So the whole aspect for wearing the pants underneath was for improving blood circulation throughout the body. Because even though the woman had the skirt, in cold temperature, cold environment, you could find that the legs will be chilled, and then it would diminish the blood flow to that area. And so she was to be dressed as thoroughly as that of a man. So by having the pants underneath, it gave the leg warmth, improved circulation. It went all the way down to the ankles, and so you didn't have this chilled air, and the person would be more comfortable. Now, this is what that reformed dress we just talked about. This is a picture of pretty much what it looked like. So you see there's the skirt, but it was attached to the top. So the skirt didn't really, the weight of the skirt was not resting on the waist and causing, that pressure on the waist, the hips to bear the weight of the skirt. But because it was attached to the blouse at the top, the shoulders would bear the weight. And underneath here, you had that pants that was spoken about, full and gathered down to the ankles. And by the time the person put on a full shoe, so not a shoe with little straps and toes exposed, but a proper shoe covering all of the feet, then that person, this lady, will be thoroughly covered and clad and kept warm in the cold temperatures so that her limbs would not be chilled. And that was what Sister White saw in her vision to be the dress for the reformed dress. Now, understand that when she shared this, a lot of the women laughed at it. They scorned the idea. They said, never me. Some of them wore it for a little while and then they threw it off and went back to their old former ways of dressing. And they really, you know, they had a distaste for it. They did not like it. They sort of want to do other things for themselves. So one of the things that they went on to do was look into the world and see what was happening. And so at the time, there was what you call the American costume. So in wide contrast to that modest dress that God had prescribed, you have the so-called American costume resembling very nearly the dress worn by men. So what does that trigger in your mind? It looks like men's clothing. It consists of a vest, pants, and dress resembling a coat and reaching about halfway from the hip to the knee. And this dress, so about the side that would stop, and this dress I have opposed from what has been shown me as in harmony with the Word of God, while the other I have recommended as modest, comfortable, convenient, and helpful. So a woman wanted to use the American costume, and she was saying, no, I oppose the American costume because it is not what God would have me, have you wear. That's not what He showed that we should be wearing. And so this is what the American costume looks like. So you do have a pants underneath. It wasn't gathered at the ankle to prevent natural air from going up the legs. It was cut short, whereas God's skirt length was longer, 9 inches from the floor. But here it was cut short. And so all the top covered, but the skirt bit cut short. And I know, personally, for me, being in the winter, like in December and in, say, in an area where it is very cold, and I had my long skirt, and yet I had to have a pants underneath that long skirt because it was so biting cold. And, so I'll be out there and it's like, oh, I think I need more clothing because it's cold. And for a woman who lives in the winter, that if your skirt is longer, the garment is longer, it's more comfortable. So after a while, when I felt comfortable, the others around me who were not so covered and dressed, they complained about it being cold, whereas I was comfortable because my skirt was long. But if you have on a skirt bit here, well, this was actually like a coat, and it dropped all the way halfway, it was not so long comparing here, then you could have some challenges with the chill. Now, a word of caution and advice to people who are listening and say, well, I am not in winter and I don't live in the winter and I have no problems with being chilled. Well, listen to the messages too. And the whole aspect, as I'll show you shortly, is to make sure that you have proper circulation. And a lot of folks work within AC, air-conditioned offices, and it can be very cold. How do you dress yourself while you're sitting for hours, working for hours in an air-conditioned environment? Are you chilled? Is your body cold? Are your legs cold? What about your feet? Are they kept warm? Do you have proper circulation throughout the entire body? So the whole thing is that we need, 1, for modesty, 2, for proper circulation of the blood to make sure that we're covered properly. So I saw, and this is a statement given here, I saw that God's order has been reversed and His special attention disregarded by those who adopt the American costume. I was referred to Deuteronomy 22:5, that the woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. God would not have his people adopt the so-called reformed dress. It is immodest apparel, wholly unfitted for the modest, humble followers of Christ. So these are strong statements. The American costume did not do it. It looked so much like that of the men's clothing that reminded Sister White of Deuteronomy 22:5. And she actually said, I was referred to that. So, in the instruction, God caused her mind to go to that text. Match it up against Scripture. This doesn't work. Then you had another one that was similar, the bloomer costume. And in the midst of this fashion worship, a few voices were heard calling for change. So lots of fashion going on at the time. And in Seneca Falls, New York, Elizabeth Cady Stanton began a dress reform movement after her cousin visited her home wearing harem-like pants and topped by a skirt which reached a little below the knee. So this skirt was a little longer, and you had this harem-like pants. And this dress was to become known as the bloomer costume and was made high sport of. Now here is the statement. Those who adopted and wore this costume were mainly those who were pushing for what? Women's rights. Some spiritualists people into the occult world and so forth also adopted the costume, subjected as it was to derision and jokes that lasted only a few years. But very important, it paved the way for the acceptance of modern pantsuits on women. It did what? It paved the way for the acceptance of modern pantsuits on women. A little after, you raise that skirt-like thing a little up, and soon you have all the full-looking pants exposed. Ellen White did not sanction nor approve this dress. Indeed, she warned Seventh-day Adventists need not to adopt it. She warned them not to adopt the bloomer costume and even the American costume. Those who feel called out to join the movement in favor of women's rights and the so-called dress reform might as well sever all connection with the third angel's message. So here you had a group who created this bloomer costume, and they said, this is what we want to wear. But she warned, said, you go wear that, you might as well sever all connection with the third angel's message. The spirit which attends the one cannot be in harmony with the other. The scriptures are plain upon the relations and rights of men and women. Plain. Spiritualists have, to quite an extent, adopted this singular mode of dress. So when you saw someone in that bloomer costume, you associated them with a spiritualist. And so if you're as a Seventh-day Adventist woman is wearing it, you bring confusion because they're going to approach you, they're going to ridicule you and all kinds of things because you're looking like them. You must be one of them. And so Seventh-day Adventists who believe in the restoration of the gifts are often branded as spiritualists. Let them adopt this costume and the influence is dead. The people would place them on a level with spiritualists and would refuse to listen to them. And hence, the pretext to this particular quotation spoke about where the people thought that if we want to win folks of the world, we should dress like them. Doesn't that sound quite familiar? If we want to win the young people, then let our music be like the world, like what they like to listen to. Let our dress be looking like them. let the way we conduct our services be much like, let's change it up, spice it up. Look at the evangelicals wanting to follow others. No, we are distinct. So it's different here. And so if what they sought to do was to dress like, in this manner to try to win those folks over, but it wouldn't work. And she said, they would class you as a brand, and brand you as a spiritualist, and your influence will be a dead one, and they would not listen to you. They would refuse to listen to you. So a reformation in women's dress was needed, but the American costume was not the answer. The bloomer costume was not the answer. God still had all along his recommended reform dress, but they gave trouble to accept it. So in June 1863, Ellen White was given a vision in which 3 groups of ladies passed before her. So the angel had the first group of ladies come forward, and they walked, and their garment was fashionably long, street-sweeping skirt, and the angel said, too long. A second group came, and the couple ladies walked before her, and they had extreme short dress that did not reach the knee, and the angel said, too short. And then a third group came, and the dress length, it was proper, it was modest, it looked healthful. And the angel said, just right. So as she got this vision, she actually met with some ladies. So the length of the dress was not given to her in inches, but in all cases, it cleared the filth of the street and sidewalk a few inches under all circumstances, even that of ascending and descending the steps. So it was not so long that if you had to go up steps, it would trip you, or come down steps that you could fall. It was not so long that it would, be dragging on the floor and sweep the street, picking up the filth. And one of the things too, as the clothing went through on the floor, if the ground was wet, if rain fell, that bottom end of the garment would get wet. And as the woman continued wearing the clothing and the garment is wet, hitting on their ankles, it actually caused them to get cold and other kinds of sickness in their ankles. So it was really so unhelpful. So it was not that long. And so Ellen White and other ladies in Michigan put on their reform dress, and the length was measured. It ranged from 8 to 10 inches from the floor, and they settled on a uniform length of 9 inches from the floor. And you can read more about that in Testimonies, Volume 1, page 461. So they settled on a uniform length of 9 inches from the floor. That is not too long, not too short. It was just right. It cleared the way at all times, even as you step up onto a pavement, as you step up onto steps or came down, it was just a good length. And it also helps with giving the proper blood circulation to the extremities, one of the things that they were looking for. So why did God give the reform dress? To protect the people of God from the corrupting influence of the world, as well as to promote physical and moral health. The dress reform was introduced among us to promote physical and moral health. It was not intended to be a yoke of bondage, but a blessing, not to increase labor, but to save labor, not to add to the expense of dress, but to save expense. It would distinguish God's people from the world and thus serve as a barrier against its passions and follies. Taken from Counsels on Health, page 598. So Satan is constantly devising some new style of dress that would prove an injury to physical and moral health. So hold on a minute. Here we see God gave a form of dress to promote good physical and moral health. And on the other hand, what does Satan always want to do? Present a counterfeit. Here he wants to give injury to physical and moral health, to break down what God is trying to build up in the woman and in our men. And he exalts when he sees professed Christians eagerly accepting the fashions that he has invented. The amount of physical suffering created by unnatural and unhealthful dress cannot be estimated, and many have become lifelong invalids through their compliance with the demands of fashion. You know, and you see some of the things we're talking about. If it is that a woman is wearing like hoops, for example, that is restraining her movements and so forth, she's not going to go out into the sun to get sunlight when the day comes. She's not going to go for some exercise as often as she should. You know, that just could make her an invalid in her state. And so it's unnatural, unhealthful. And that's what the enemy wants to do. He also invented a fashion which leaves the limbs exposed, chilling back the life current from its original course. The result is habitual cold feet and hands. So the blood, whereas it should be on its way down to your hands, on its way down to your feet, it is going back, chilled back, held back from going there as it should, because if your blood were to go down so lower and your body is chilled, it's going to come back cold, and it can cause inflammation in the body. It can even be a threat to your organs. So he invented those fashions which leave the limbs exposed. So all your arms exposed, your legs very much exposed. Satan invented the fashions. Don't forget that. So when we look at a dictionary term for fashion, a noun is a prevailing custom or style of dress, etiquette, socializing, etc., the latest fashion. So fashion is very much like, you know, what we see within our society and so forth, that's prevailing, and it would be in season and then it goes out, and another fashion would come. Now, fashion rules the world, and she is a tyrannical mistress, often compelling her devotees to submit the greatest inconvenience and discomfort. Satan triumphs that his devices succeed so well, and death laughs at the health-destroying folly and blind zeal of the worshippers at fashion's shrine. Okay, taken from Testimonies, Volume 4, page 634. Fashion rules the world. Satan laughs, he triumphs when he sees Christian women and men submitting to this fashion and destroying their health. Now, the first aspect is that we look at proper blood circulation. Temperature is an important factor to our general comfort. Perfect health depends upon perfect blood circulation in the body. Perfect health depends upon perfect blood circulation in the body. Now, when you're feeling cold, it's raining, it's cold, it's, you know, the time of the year where the temperature has dropped, what's one of the first things that you do? You go find warm clothing. And so your attempt to do that, as you find warm clothing, you are actually seeking to regulate your temperature so that you don't feel cold, you feel comfortable, and you want to regulate the surface temperature of the body. So you put on some warm clothes. And as you do that, you may see that if you huddle close to someone, you get some body heat, and you try to keep warm and toasty. Now, you have the core temperature of the body that must maintain the right internal temperature in order for us to stay alive. So our body must maintain an inner core temperature in order for us to stay alive. And that includes our vital organs, such as your heart, your liver, your kidneys, and the blood need to maintain a proper, its temperature. It has a temperature it needs to maintain in order for us to do what? Stay alive. It must always be right around 98 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 to 38 degrees Celsius. That's the core body temperature. And if it varies too much, systems cannot function properly and our health is in the red. It is in danger. So what is responsible for maintaining this internal body temperature? The hypothalamus, a little part there in the brain that is responsible for maintaining homeostasis. So if you're too hot, it has a way to cool you down. If you're too cold, it has a way to warm you up. But then again, our environment may not have control of our environment, and so we need to aid it with some covering, with some clothes. And so the hypothalamus, it's there in the brain, signaling to the body the different sense that it's picking up, too hot or too cold in our environment. And so you have this tiny heat sensors that alert the hypothalamus of the changes in the temperature. So when you're exercising, you actually exercise very correctly, you heat up the body. What does the hypothalamus say you need? To cool down. So immediately you have sweat production that would aid in cooling down the body. It's like a fire truck. Perspiration, come on and cool down the body. And if you were to put your hand and feel the skin of someone who's heated up, it's cool. The skin isn't like burning. It's cool because you're actually feeling that water there, that perspiration to cool them down. So you have this layer of perspiration to cool the body down. And so the skin gets flushed as blood vessels dilate for your skin to release that heat. And so your body, now internal core, is releasing the heat. So you can put your hand against the body and feel the heat coming off. Now, if outdoors you're in winter and you're not clad properly, those tiny sensors alert the hypothalamus again of your chilled extremities. The fingers are too cold, the hands and the feet, they're too cold. And so they feel cold, and the body retains most heat to your core. So if the outside is very cold, you find your nose might be cold, your hands, your feet cold, but inside your body needs to maintain that temperature. So all the blood sort of surrounds your core area, your organs, to keep them warm, because if they were to get cold and chilled, you'd pass out. So muscles become tense and we start shivering up. It's the body's natural way up to maintain that core temperature. As you shiver, you're shaking, it's sort of causing that friction to warm you up. Now, our Creator has formed the limbs with large veins and vessels to contain a large portion of blood, that the limbs may be sufficiently nourished and proportionately warm with other portions of the body. But fashion robs the limbs of its covering, and the life current is chilled from its natural channel and thrown back upon its internal organs. Now, one of the things when we teach is that we like to give you proper understanding. So I'm going to go a little bit into the effects of chilling the extremities and what kind of effects it can have on your health. And right away you begin to, connect some dots and think, hey, when one is sick, it's eating, what you drink, but definitely how you dress can affect your health. So, and our body actually supports proper circulation. You have arteries, you have veins, Veins carry blood to the tissues, blood from the tissues to the body, back to the heart, and the arteries are actually carry blood away from the heart to the tissues. So they work in harmony with each other. And the veins, they are usually positioned closer beneath the skin, whereas the arteries, they're more deeper within the body. And so our whole circulatory system is, in maintaining proper warmth. Then you also have certain areas of the body that needs to maintain temperatures. So the breast, for example, what's the temperature of the breast? 88 degrees Fahrenheit in normal circumstances. And so you see that it is actually cooler than the core body, which is between 98 to 100. So the back of your hand is like 90.5 degrees Fahrenheit. The hollow of your hand is a little warmer. And you just put your, test these things. Feel yourself. Your cheek, it can be warm. The rectum is really warm, and that's why you see certain thermometers being placed within the rectum. Under the forearm, you have the calf, the upper thigh, that's pretty warm. Sternum, the stomach is, and this is very important for the stomach, 99.6 degrees Fahrenheit. It's warm, very warm, and that's why when you drink something cold, it needs to warm up first. The stomach, it needs to be warm in order for the digestion to take place. Stomach is not going to work in a cold environment. Enzymes are not going to work in a cold environment, so you need the proper temperature there. Look at your liver, 106, pretty heated. And you just go on the brain, 104, so that's why the head has hair for its covering. And if you don't have hair on your head, you need to put on a hat or a scarf or something so that you keep that area in good warmth. And the blood has 102 degrees Fahrenheit of temperature that it needs to maintain. Hence the reason, if you're chilling the body because you're in an AC or it's winter time and you're chilling the body, you are actually causing the blood in that exposed area to become at a lower temperature than 102. And that, if it's going to make its way back to the heart, it's going to cause problems. And so the organs, the liver cannot, the liver is actually hotter. So you can't have cool blood coming by your liver. It's going to cause trouble. You can pass out. So the limits of tolerance of body temperature. So you can have, what's the least? Anywhere between 77 to 101 degrees Fahrenheit. So at 110 to 111 degrees Fahrenheit, you can lose consciousness. If the body temperature goes up to 112 degrees Fahrenheit, it's an irreversible protein denation starts to take place, so you start to lose weight. And that's why when you have fever, the temperatures are high, and it starts to break down the protein in your muscles, and you appear to have lost weight because you have. And, the high temperatures would do that to the body. On the other hand, if the temperature of your core would drop, so for example, if it drops to 92 degrees Fahrenheit, you can lose consciousness, so you faint. And if it drops to, say, like about 82 degrees Fahrenheit, you can have cardiac fibrillation, which is actually quivering or irregular heartbeats that can lead to blood clots, stroke, heart failure. And if your core body temperature was to drop anywhere like 77 degrees Fahrenheit, you will die. And that's why you see individuals who would go out on hiking expeditions in the winter, and they get trapped out there. A snowstorm comes and they're trapped and they don't have warmth. They can freeze to death. and it can cause some serious issues to them. So there is the point here that there is a body core temperature that needs to be maintained. So special attention should be given to the extremities, that they may be as thoroughly clothed as the chest and the region over the heart, where is the greatest amount of heat. Parents who dress their children with the extremities naked or nearly so are sacrificing the health and happiness of their children to fashion. If these parts are not so warm as the body, the circulation is not equalized. And when the extremities, so you don't have, the circulation is not equal, the blood is not going to move around uniformly throughout the entire body because the extremities are chilled. The blood makes a U-turn and goes back up because I'm not going down into that area. And that's why people have poor blood circulation down in their feet when they are exposed to the cold. So, and then you see the area gets blue, the toes get blue and everything. So when the extremities, which are remote from the vital organs and not properly clad, you don't have on the proper warm boots or shoes or, you know, the underpants or the skirts and so forth, the blood is driven to the head, causing headache. Too much blood in the head, you can get it spilling out through your nose, so the nose bleed. And there is a sense of fullness about the chest, producing cough, palpitation of the heart on account of too much blood in that locality, or the stomach has too much blood causing indigestion now. So when you see you run to the doctor because of heart palpitation, and they check you out and they can't find anything wrong systematically, or you know, they can't figure out what's wrong, why not look at how you're dressing? How you're dressing actually can cause you to have palpitations of the heart. So, and you have these, you know, depressed feeling in your chest that causes you to want to cough because too much blood within the chest area. So make sure all your arms, your legs and everything is covered, and that you don't have within your trunk area from, say, your hips to your shoulders, that only that part is covered. No, make sure you have. And I've seen certain clothing, like coats for the winter, one of those that I would say, you know, it's like the fashion of this coat or the style of the coat is such that it is sleeveless, and it just covers from the neck all the way down to the waist or the hip area. And that particular style of that coat is very warm and fluffy on the inside, but it's sleeveless. So you have to have some other garment with much sleeve to cover the rest of your body, and that means you have this coat that's covering the chest area plus whatever garment that's so thick to give your arms comfort. You know, is that it could be too warm within your chest and cause the blood to be concentrated there too much. So I would say that that particular piece of article of clothing is not one that would promote health. You need to have a proper coat with sleeves included. So in a woman who once pregnant and doesn't dress themselves well, during pregnancy, the placenta may not get sufficient circulation of the blood. As a result of a sluggish exchange of blood, the development of the fetus may be retarded. That's pretty serious. And then you have disease has been transmitted from parents to children, from generation to generation. Infants in the cradle are miserably afflicted because of the sins of their parents, which have lessened their vital force. Their wrong habits of eating and dressing and their general dissipation are transmitted as an inheritance to their children. Chilling of the baby's extremities may cause congestion in the abdomen, where even a teaspoon of extra blood may distressfully crowd the organs. if the baby is also wearing clothing with tight bands, either around the abdomen or thighs, the stage is set for colic. And then your baby is crying and uncomfortable and so forth because the parts of the body exposed and the clothing is so tight around the belly and the thigh area, the legs, and it's very uncomfortable. So children are a heritage of the Lord, and they should be trained and disciplined to form characters that the Lord can approve. In order to form the fashions, mothers dress their children with limbs nearly naked, and the blood is chilled back from its natural course and thrown upon the internal organs, breaking up the circulation and producing disease, especially of the lungs and the brain. Diseases of the lungs, like lung infection, pneumonia, and so forth. Brain can be affected as well, all because of how you're dressing, exposing the body to the chills. So children's clothing need not be and should not be fashionable, but plain and simple. So we have our little ones with some short arms outside, legs, and so forth. If the dress of the child combines warmth, protection, and comfort, one of the chief causes of irritation and restlessness will be removed. The little one will have better health, and the mother will not find the care of the child so heavy a tax upon his strength and time. So we really, if your child is sick, it takes much of your time and attention. And so by ensuring that they dress properly, it helps them to achieve better health. This is also quite interesting, that a large number of sweat glands may not become permanently inactivated during childhood if they are never vigorously stimulated by heating or exercise. So you have sweat glands within children that as they exercise, they open up, they are activated, and they begin to work for the rest of their lifetime. But if they are covered in a way that they don't sweat and then they don't move around and so forth, because you don't want the nice dainty clothes to get soiled, then they wouldn't perspire, and so those sweat glands will not be activated. So perspiration gets rid of the waste and material buildup within the body. So you want your child to perspire. The limbs, which should have been more covered than any other portion of the body, because furthest from the center of circulation, are often not suitably protected, while over the vital organs, where there is naturally more warmth than other portions of the body, there is undue proportion of covering. The heavy draperies often worn upon the back induce heat and congestion in the sensitive organs that lie beneath it. And this fashionable attire is one of the greatest causes of disease among women. Perfect health depends upon perfect circulation. So our women may wear dresses like these. All arm exposed, legs exposed. This one top covered, yeah, but legs exposed. This one top covered, neckline low, but legs exposed. So true dress reform regulates every article of dress upon the person. In order to equalize the circulation of the blood, the clothing should be equally distributed upon the person, that equal warmth may be preserved in all parts of the body. So true dress reform regulates every aspect of clothing and that is worn. Now we talked about the normal skin temperature that ranges from 90 to 97. This is the temperature of the skin, and so exposing the arms and legs takes skin temperature of 80 to 84. So it actually lowers that skin temperature and below. And at this temperature, you find that potassium and other waste accumulates in the tissue to be to be released suddenly on rewarming. If you have now an excess of potassium in the blood, it can cause heart rhythm disturbances. So the potassium stores up in the tissue, and when you warm, it releases again back into the bloodstream. So we feel hot when our core temperature rises. So your core, that inner trunk area, is hot because the core temperature rises when you have the poor circulation to the extremities. Understand this? So you feel your core temperature is hot when your circulation to the extremities is poor. So if you are feeling hot, put on some clothing. Don't just take it off, because when you take off and you wear less, you find the blood will concentrate more within the trunk area and you feel hot even more. So have a look at this picture and tell me which one you think would feel hotter. This person with her arms and legs exposed, or this person that's properly covered, arms covered, legs covered? Who will feel hotter? Well, the answer is this person with the arms and legs exposed, because the core temperature will be hot when the extremities are covered less. So the extremities are chilled and the heart has thrown upon it now double labor to force it to those chilled extremities. And when the blood has performed its circuit through the body and returned to the heart, it is not the same vigorous warmth current which left it. And so it has been chilled in its passage through the limbs, and the heart, weakened by too great labor now, and poor circulation of poor blood, that's now chilled, cooler, is then compelled to still greater exertion to throw the blood to the extremities. It has to work even harder to try to send blood down to your legs because they don't want it to die. And so the heart fails in its effort, and the limbs become habitually cold, and the blood which is chilled away from the extremities is thrown back upon the lungs and the brain. You find inflammation and congestion of the lungs or the brain is a result. And when the limbs and arms are chilled, the blood is driven back from these parts, and the lungs and head, the circulation is unbalanced, and nature's fine machinery does not move harmoniously. So you find that you could be more fatigued, your legs feel tired, you don't feel like you're energetic to move and go anywhere because the blood is not circulating throughout. So there are some diseases caused from body exposure to cold. You have indigestion, nerve and vein become contracted. Bad circulation causes disease, double labor on the heart, weakening the heart, congested lungs, congested brain, constant cold, paleness, weakness. Dwarf limbs and small muscles, catarrh, congestion, postnasal drip, and influenza. A particular man was asked why his daughter was so sickly and his sons were not. He was advised to dress his daughter with the same consideration as his sons, and she would not be sickly. So the boys are actually covered more than the girls. More diseases that you can get: miscarriages, PMS, endometriosis, cancer, because you're not allowing the blood to circulate throughout. Now, I just want to share quickly an experiment where you had animals or humans were given a cold treatment by placing them in cold water, or the animals or refrigerated rooms, such as a cold room, to check out the physiological effect of cold. Now, the thing is that they had to run this experiment on a lot of animals because it would have been unethical to do it on people. Imagine putting somebody in a cold, chiller room, like some ice rooms, And, you can't do that to a human being and then just say we want to run an experiment on you. So it was easier to do it on animals. And so this is, we just going to look at some of the effects that it played out on the animals, or even as it would vary with human beings as they were exposed to cold treatment. So when exposed to cold treatment, the stomach was found to have acute erosions leading to ulcers in cold, stressed animals. The kidneys was also found to have nephrosis. The nephrons became hardened so that they cannot filter properly or return what they should to the system. And so, the kidneys were affected, and that was common with high blood pressure and high blood sugar. The liver, you had fatty liver disease coming as a result of exposure to cold, and this is fatty liver outside of use of alcohol. Then you also had congestion of the brain, or swelling in the brain, and so the brain swells and it loses its function, and so you definitely would have a headache. And if severe, sufficiently severe, you can have hemorrhaging or bleeding in the brain. And this is exposure from cold. The spleen, which is part of your immune system, in rats, cold exposure marks a decrease in the size of the spleen, as well as the lymph nodes and the lymph organs. That is your immune system now compromised, so you can be so sickly because of cold exposure to cold. And the heart, that when exposed to cold, it would cause vessels to be constricted, placing increased load on the heart, and as well as palpitations and arrhythmias. And so if the blood vessels are constricted, the heart has to pump even harder to try to push that blood through the narrowed and constricted blood vessels. So you see your blood pressure can go up right away there. The adrenal glands that sits above the kidneys, when exposed to cold, they can actually cause damage and cause one to produce more adrenaline, and you would think, well, I feel so energetic, but it's because it's taxing your adrenal gland all the time. And so your endocrine glands, when exposed to cold, you have an alarm reaction that's going off, adrenaline being produced, they're overstimulating those areas of your body, your adrenal gland included, and it depletes vitamin C when you have your adrenal gland being overworked, and you have adrenal gland fatigue, which would cause you to have difficulties in getting to bed, weight gain, asthma, dark circles under the eye, you have lines on your fingernails and so forth. So a lot of low sex drive, frequent urination, mood swings, a lot of conditions because of adrenal gland fatigue. The thyroid gland is also affected. That would be, trying to increase your energy to make you feel warm, but it's being taxed so much that it doesn't function well. You have your pituitary gland that can be reduced in size, or even your testes can be reduced in size. You have hyperthyroidism, that because of long exposure to chilling of the body, and even if your neck is getting that coldness, your thyroid gland right there can be affected. Or avoid prolonged chilling in cancer. If you already have cancer, as a stimulus to the thyroid can promote the cancer growth. So the cancer tumor can even grow more rapidly because of prolonged chilling. Vitamin C is lost. You have cholesterol levels increase, blood sugar goes up, or your blood sugar can actually dip and go on the low. you have blood pressure that's increased, gastric erosions, and so forth. So a lot of blood clotting. Blood tends to clot faster in cold areas. So if you're chilling your body, exposing your body to the cold, your blood can, have a more blood clotting mechanism. Then you have your white blood cells, which tend to accumulate more in the peripheral blood, so that blood to your arms and your legs, and less in your organs, so you are not able to fight off infections and diseases that will be coming to your liver or your kidneys and so forth, making you quite exposed to infections. So allergies can be increased with cold exposures, leaky gut syndrome, arthritis, edema, swelling in the joints, and even hemorrhaging in the eyes. So you want to be able to have proper blood circulation and good body temperature maintained. The health action of the respiratory organs, assisting the circulation of the blood, will actually invigorate the whole system, excite the appetite, promote digestion, and induce sound, sweet sleep. Thus not refreshing the body, but soothing and tranquilizing the mind. So one of the things is that you want to keep cool in the sunlight. You do have a covering of infrared rays on the surface of the body. And so when you expose your body, you go outdoors with the short sleeves and that sort of thing, the sun shines on that, the layer of infrared rays intermingles with the sunlight. It can actually make you feel hotter, whereas if you were properly clad, you wouldn't have that kind of effect, and so the body will be all the better for it. So I want to stop here and take questions, and we will continue with this lecture on another occasion.